For centuries, the story of the Igbo people has sparked debates among its chroniclers. But what if one of our most respected royal figures could give us a new perspective on who the Igbo are and where they came from? This is what His Royal Majesty, Obi Alfred Nnaemeka Achebe, the Obi of Onitsha, did at the maiden edition of the Obi Nnaemeka Achebe annual public lecture on Igbo Repository, where he unveiled an extraordinary story, one that brought new light to the ancient history of the Igbo people. Igwe Alfred Nnaemeka Achebe, the 21st Obi of Onitsha, Anambra State, isn't just a revered traditional ruler. He is also a scholar, a statesman, and a guardian of Igbo cultural memory. Under his leadership, Onitsha has become a bridge between tradition and modernity, and the Obi himself has emerged as a voice of historical preservation and intellectual reflection. In his address, Obi Achebe explored the origin of Ndi Igbo, from their early settlement patterns to the ancestral connection with other ethnic groups. He addressed the controversy of the ancient Igbo people in Ile-Ife theory. His lecture invited us to look deeper, beyond myths and colonial records, into the shared ancestry and cultural intersections that shaped the Igbo people. This speech is not just history, it's a rediscovery of the Igbo identity that we all should heed.
And starting with Igbo history of origin, I'll read two quotations. By the way, this is a short presentation. The main lecture is about 61 pages long, including 57 references. So I've taken a short version. But then, the importance of history. Why is history important? As Vice Chancellor was saying, why do we need to know where we come from? I'll read two quotations. One by a novelist, David Lodge. He says that history is the verdict of those who were not there on those who were there. You get the point? How do we know? So we make our best effort at all times to figure out what happened 10,000 years ago and so on. Another quotation says, all histories are, in a sense, visits to foreign places. We cannot actually go there. So you talk about places that you cannot go to. But still, by endeavoring, we get to know more and get to learn more. And again, why history? If you recall, a few months ago, one Professor Bako of, I think, University, University, gave his inaugural lecture on the subject of the Igbo factor in the history of intergroup relations and commerce in Kano. And of course, why Professor Edmond Danfodio, in his own inaugural lecture, will talk about Igbos in Kano. And of course, he badly misrepresented the Igbo presence and the history of the Igbos in Kano in the way Anyibundi Igbo would see it. And immediately, Dr. Sam Amadi gave a lecture, like a response to that lecture by Professor Bako. And Sam Amadi said that forgetting is dying. If you forget, if you're then you are not existing. But self-awareness and other awareness are most important aspects of existence. And it says, when we forget events and their meaning, we expose ourselves to deception by competitors and our enemies. When we forget events and their meanings, we expose ourselves to deceptions by our competitors and our enemies, which is what Dr. Bako has tried to do. He's tried to deceive people about Ndi Igbo. And of course, Sam Amadi rose up to that. More to say on why we must pay attention to our history. Ile-Ife, a great historian, said, the Igbo people, like any other group of people, are anxious to discover their origin and to reconstruct how they came to be where they are. Why are we here? Why are we not in the Niger Delta or in the desert? And we've been here, we're making our life here. Their experiences under colonialism and since Nigeria's independence have emphasized for them the reality of their group identity they want to anchor into authentic history. So the war has made us realize, or should make us realize, who we are and to value it and hold it very dear. Finally, one more quote, or it's not a quote actually, but it's a narrative. During the war, Second World War, Sir Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister of Britain. And he kept saying to the British people on his radio broadcast every evening that the most important reason why Britain must defeat Germany in the Second World War is that it is the winner who lives to write the history. And Britain and America wrote the history of the Second World War. Germany was the bad guy. Of where? Okay. But Germany fought back. Not by writing history, but with technology. So today, the German economy is far bigger and stronger than the British economy. Why we must open our eyes. Colonialism. The colonial people wrote the history of colonialism in Nigeria. And even those things they wrote, we used it to do our exams, our school certificate exams, and so on. Thankfully, there's a new book, it's out for about 3 years now, by Max Suliom. And the title is What Britain Did to Nigeria, the History of Conquest and Rule. It's a counter-history to the colonial history, using the same sources that the colonial people used, from the crown agents, from the colonial office, and digging out information that were hiding there. If the damage that Britain did to Nigeria, particularly Igbo, they took over the north, controlled it, and the west, but they couldn't figure out Igbo. Asaba, Ekumeku, na Nyoma, they couldn't figure it out. Arochukwu, they couldn't figure it out. So they wrote our history, which we have to respond to. That book is very useful, if anybody can get it and read it. And nearer home, the Civil War. Who is writing the history of the Civil War? Orondiozo. Aywabundi Ajomadu, right? Who are the rebels and so on. So, if you don't fight for yourself, your enemies will write your own history the way it suits them, which is very, very important, which is the very reason why the repository, the Igbo Repository, becomes very important. Not only UNICEF, because there are other institutions where such efforts are being made. And we have to all work together and stand tall. And what we're going to talk about today will show you what Igbo's compared to Ndiozo. So, the origin of Igbo. There are three broad hypotheses. Okay? The Vice Chancellor mentioned one of them already, the autochthony hypothesis, which says that Chukwu Kalundi Igbo, where we are today, now either Eri or whatever name we call it, Chukwu Zidatalia, I became the father of Ndi Igbo, where we are today. Yorubas have their own equivalent. That's Oduduwa in Ueda. But we know where Oduduwa came from, and they know where Oduduwa came from. I will address a bit of that today. So that is one theory about the origin of Ndi Igbo. And the antiquity of Ndi Igbo we tend to support that theory in some way. The second hypothesis is the internal migration hypothesis that says that Ndi Igbo were at some stage, that is thousands of years ago, at the confluence of the Niger and the Benue around Lokoja. And that ndi Igbo, and the Yoruba, and the Edo, Bini, the Jukun were all one people until the point with discovery of iron and all of that, the Sebohu, and then they migrated to where they are today. As a second theory. And people like Richard Henderson, people like Okonkwo, proposed that theory. Then, of course, the external migration theory that says that Ndi Igbo see either Egypt or Israel. I think they say more about Israel. And people like Basden, G.T. Basden, and Bon Eluwa, B.O.N. Eluwa, hold that theory. But we shall show with the studies of modern scholarly approach, modern scholarly research, discount this hypothesis. Because someone like Catherine Achelon actually has stated with good reason that Ndi Igbo actually predates Egypt and Israel. So you cannot originate from where you predate. Maybe it could be the other way around. So those are the three hypotheses. Now, whatever the hypothesis one believes in, one thing is very clear. The antiquity of Ndi Igbo, established. Now, pottery, earthen pottery, from around 3000 BC, have been excavated at Nsukka in 1970. Earthen pottery. That iron smelting at Nsukka and Afikpo existed, that is, smelted iron had been excavated with carbon testing to be as old as 750 years BC and 2000 years BC. OP 750 and Ledger 2000 BC. And of course, we now know about the IgboHistory bronze and artifacts which were excavated in our present generation, which dates as far back as to the 9th and 10th century AD. Ife is 12th and 13th century, and Benin is 14th century. So the Igbo artifacts are older than Ife and Benin. So that's why I said earlier on, Nsukka and Afikpo were probably at the beginning of the Iron Age. At the beginning of the Iron Age, from the Stone Age to Iron Age, which is why Nnamdi Azikiwe went back to the foundation of iron technology and set up a university there. Another point about Igbo antiquity. This one will cause controversy. After this lecture, I expect there'll be some media reaction. But we've prepared a press release. We should cover what I said as much as possible. Prof, I hope we have the press releases ready now. Okay, thank you very much. In recent times, the Ooni of Ife has made statements that Ndi Igbo came from Ile-Ife. Made that statement several times. Ndi Igbo Jeffrey, I know no bofu, not a bike swap. But he didn't say when Ndi Igbo got to Ile-Ife before they left, when the Yorubas left, arrived in Ile-Ife. But it is well established that Ndi Igbo were in Ile-Ife long before the Yorubas arrived there. Established. And the authorities that I'm quoting are more Yoruba than anybody else. And the Igbo were there and dominated Ile-Ife. Okay. Today, there's still a village in Ile-Ife, which is the remnants of the Igbos who didn't migrate away. Because the story was that the Igbo were there, dominated Ile-Ife, okay, until the Yorubas came. And then, by cordial relationships and all of that, okay, Ewesebo on who to succeed, Oduduwa, or and so on. The Igbo were claiming it's their rights, the Yorubas, and so on. And the Igbo started attacking the Yoruba elements. When they used masquerades to attack them. The Yorubas thought they were spirits. They were afraid until Moremi offered herself as a slave woman to the Igbo group. And they presented her to the king of Ndi Igbo. That's how she found the secret. Now more Abro spirit, and gave the story back to their people. And they defeated Ndi Igbo. Then migration coming back. That is the significance of Moremi in Yoruba history. That's why they call her their heroine, because she saved them and then dominated the whole place. Today, in Ile-Odua, which is the palace of the Ooni of Ife, the ancient throne of the Igbo king is still there, and it's part of their ceremonies. And they have an annual ceremony which they call the Edi ceremony, which marks the defeat of Ndi Igbo, and their return home. It's an annual ceremony. There's a scholarly article on that. I'm not talking about them. These are all references that I'm quoting. And of course, Reverend Samuel Johnson, The History of Yoruba People, it's a big volume. Eluwa, Onyibo. Aremu, Ijesakin, and Ademiliya are Yorubas. They wrote this scholarly article on the annual festival. Professor Ade Obayemi, who is one of the top Yoruba historians, and of course, Oba himself. In the disputes between Ooni of Ife and Ulubo of Igboland, Ife people claim that Moremi is their heroine. Ulubo said she's a traitor, that she was the one who revealed the secret that led them to get away, and that the Igbo were in Ile-Ife before the Yorubas arrived. Ooni said, no, the Igbo, IgboHistory, were there before Yorubas arrived, before Oduduwa arrived. In public, in print, in the newspapers. So what is the difference between Ugbo and Igbo? That's for another discussion, another time. But Ndi Ugbo, which is in Okitipupa in Ondo State, are probably part of that Igbo movement that left Ile-Ife. Kana Agazi, Ndi Igbo, they stay on their own, and so on and so forth. So to summarize on the Igbo history, before we go into Onitsha, it's clear that according to Katin Acholonu, that Ndi Igbo had existed as far back as 11,000 years BC. And that was 7,000 years before the first king of Egypt, who was a black man. So you can figure out where he came from. Secondly, we've talked about Nsukka and Afikpo, and they support the autochthony hypothesis. Then, of course, the internal migration suggests that Igbo, Yoruba, Edo, Jukun, and so on and so forth had an ancestral connection before they broke away. And if they did, why don't you go back and reestablish that connection? Because in Nigeria today, only open and natural 1 year. So we have to rediscover our connections and build a platform to address our own challenges and so on. So we'll come back to Onitsha. And again, for Onitsha, Nnaemeka features very prominently in the founding of Onitsha, and of course, a whole lot of other communities on the Enuani and Neoma side, there are probably about 19 communities that disclaim descent from Chima. On this side, many more. There are four versions of how Onitsha came to exist. Okay, one, from S.I. Bosa, on the history of Onitsha. And the Onitsha were part of, they were Edo people. And then Achebe, and they migrated, okay, led by Chima. Okay. Eluwa, who wrote the book Adonidu, claims that the Onitsha were part of that return migration, or that migration of Ndi Igbo when they left Ile-Ife. So they stopped in Benin for several centuries and then continued their migration. The third hypothesis, which comes from Iseluku, there's a book, the History of Iseluku Kingdom. Now, Chima was the 5th king of Benin. I'm sorry, the Chima was 5th king of Iseluku. But his father was the 4th, his grandfather was the 3rd, his great-grandfather was the 2nd, and then the 1st king of Iseluku was the son, the 2nd son of Oba Eweka, the 1st of Benin. Which means that Benin kingdom, Oba sent his son, 2nd son, to go and form a new kingdom as a defense against Igala and Igbo attackers. That is their claim. That's how Iseluku got established. And that Onitsha is the 5th king of direct descent from Eweka the 1st. Now it gets interesting because Eweka the 1st is the son of Arameon, who is the son of Oduduwa, established. And these Benin people now claim that very clear since the new Oba came onto the throne. So there are linkages which we need to figure out. That's the point I'm making. And in all of this, Benin features very, very actively. And of course, the 4th migration, but actually Aro, because the Aros were itinerant people migrating from one place to the other. Aro medicine man went to Benin, established himself, became a soothsayer to the king. Then there was a disagreement and he came back. Okay. But then, if you go through the history, you'll find that the Chima era existed before we know of the Aro migration. There's an Aro migration westwards and then came back again. So, which of them? There are also a whole lot of consequences, in terms of, if you're looking at all these 4 theories. I discount the Aro hypothesis. But S.I. Bosa, Abundi Bini, Eluwa, Abia and Benin are migrated. And then, of course, Iseluku, that Abundi Seluku, originally, but migrated from Benin. By the way, after Chima reigned, Iseluku went into crisis. Azolo who to replace him, went into crisis, which led to the migration of Oreze coming back to form Onitsha. But then other people from Iselu went to found other communities, Isela Zaba, Isela Pichima, Onitsha, Olona, etc., etc. Okay. But one thing is constant, that there was a migration from Benin. Okay. So the Oreze group then arrived, got across, and settled down. Okay. So we're looking at Onitsha now. From the time Oreze settled with his people, followed by Chimevi, Obi Chimevi, followed by other traditional, other kings, up to Aroli. So from Oreze was the beginning of Onitsha, settling down. Aroli took it to the next level, and I look at the third level now when Christianity and colonialism came up to the present time. Now, the components of Onitsha Donidu, which is Onitsha. Okay. The components, first of all, is the core group that Chima led up to wherever it was. And Oreze now led them across. And I was Umwezi Chima, comprising of Isiokwe, Olosi, Umwezi Arole, and Okebenabo. Okay. I'm for Umwezi Chima and Onitsha. The second group, Bundi Bayazo, the migration along the way. It all came up together. It all had their functions. Ugunobamba, Ekenu Bene, and all of that. The third group, Bundi Ekudole, Nde Gala Ekudole on the waterfront, who helped to ferry them across. They now constitute two villages, Obi-Boro, I'm sorry, not Obi-Boro, Obo-Otu and Welekeke. Okay. Obi-Boro is also a Gala, but all their father be a Gala that married the daughter of Ezarole. Then the fourth group, Betazil Onitsha. Bundi Sizi Ani Bundi Ozo, Oze particularly, and Oze Noko Dinawunye a lot. Ogidi, Ubosi, and all of that. All of us are now integrated into Onitsha, what as we know today, 4 different groups, but into one. That's what we are today. Okay? And then, of course, in that dispersion from Iseluku, I mentioned there were about 19 communities on the western side of the Niger, Enuani, and Aneoma, that Bundi, who claimed descent from Chima. And then on the eastern side, well, Abo is also on the western side, but from Onitsha, movement, they went to Guta and founded Guta. And his other brother went to Abo and founded Abo. So all of that constitutes Umweze Chima, as we know today. But there's more. There's more. Because on the eastern side of the Niger, Onitsha, Deputy Governor, are you hearing me? I will Onitsha, Bom. Onitsha Boma, Ititi. Onitsha Mi, Isu Ikwato. They're all in Abia State. Fabo Onitsha. And Ijuafa, those people always see themselves as slightly different from the larger community around them. Ijen Imo State. I'm very familiar with that one. Onichudo, Nambise, and Onishankwere, they're both in Imo State. And Ebonyi State, well, Onisha Hozara, Onisha Eza, and Hozara, well, Onisha Eba. And of course, the Enugu State, they will Onitsha Agu. Okay? So, that's what I'm trying to say. We are dispersed, all over the place. What are the connections between, with all these Onitsha's, with the Chima dynasty? These are questions that should be answered. This is why we need this center for Igbo Repository. So we can do research, we can do more research, and do more inquiries, go on the spot, look at the artifacts, do excavations, and find out the historical connections, and so on and so forth. We need to know. There's more. In Yorubaland, in Oyo State, and 4 communities that are spelled Onisa, O-N-I-S-A. We know in Yoruba, O-N-I-S-A is called Onitsha. So in Oyo State, there are 4 communities. In Oyo, 4 communities. Ogbomoso, 3 communities. Ogun State, 1. on Osun State, one. Are there any connections with Onitsha and Kaimau? Or is it a creation of their own, or whatever it is? We need to inquire. We need to find out how those people got to where they were. Because when Ife broke up, people migrated in different directions. Okay? People migrated in different directions. You see? So it could be that these people went on their own way when the main group was going, but we need to find out. We need to know, which is why research is important. So we fast track then to back to Onitsha itself. Okay, I've talked about the arrival of Oreze as the beginning of the foundation of Onitsha town, Onitsha community, Onitsha Donidu, or Onitsha Mili as we know it today. The next level was Ezaroli, who came from Igala and brought Igala royal traditions, which are far more sophisticated, moving Onitsha to the next level. And the third, of course, I said, was the arrival of Christianity and colonialism. And both of them arrived in the same vessel in 1857, the day spring, okay? Which bettered at Onitsha under Obi Akazua, okay? Just to fast track, between 1863 and 1888, the colonial government or the colonialists extracted at least four treaties, there are a few more, but four major treaties from Ndi Onitsha, our traditional rulers, on the suppression of slave trade, on the prevention of human sacrifice, on the opening and encouraging of legitimate trade, on the protection of Christian missionaries, and on the cession of title. They took our land, we just signed and put our thumbprint, and then finally on the protection by the colonial government, which is why we became a protectorate. We became part of the protectorate. As we're getting the treaties from us, they're doing the same in Asaba, doing the same in Otmanam, doing the same in all the other communities. Now, see? Whilst the colonialists were doing their own bits, trying to browbeat us and subjugate us, the Christians were also spreading Christianity. The CMS mission, I said, arrived in 1857 on the day spring. Ajayi Crowther, J.C. Taylor, and Simon Jonas. Ajayi Crowther was Yoruba, J.C. Taylor and Simon Jonas Bundibo, slaves that were saved from the slave ships, taken to Sierra Leone, educated, and then they became missionaries and they came. And of course, they settled in Onitsha. Onitsha became the base for the Anglican CMS mission to spread Christianity up in the north into the middle belt, the south to the Niger Delta, east and west, and so on. And Onitsha became the seat. Ajayi Crowther eventually became bishop of what eventually became the whole territory of Nigeria, except Lagos, Ibadan, and Abeokuta, that were under the diocese of Sierra Leone, Freetown, Sierra Leone. So Onitsha became the headquarters of the CMS mission in the whole of Nigeria, under Ajayi Crowther. And following that was C.J. Patterson. Again, Onitsha, Christ Church Onitsha, with their thrones, became the Archbishop of West Africa from Onitsha, ruling the whole of West Africa Anglican Communion. So Onitsha began to acquire status with the church. Of course, many of our people became pioneers, missionaries, including Reverend Yemunam, Bishop Onyabo, and so on. As if by magic, 28 years later, the Catholic mission arrived at Onitsha. Again, made Onitsha their base, from where they spread Christianity. Reverend Father Lutz, then Bishop Shanahan, then Bishop Hiri, and so on and so forth. So Onitsha has been fortunate because with Christianity came education. So Onitsha people became, again, early beneficiaries of modern education. And of course, behind that also came medical services. See. But of course, there are backlashes because Christianity now says that polygamy is not the right thing to do. So, if you want to become a Christian, I think you should and marry only one, the first wife, and all of that. And that's created a pushback, from some of our people. A few other things that they were demanding, which by now Tarasi and so on. In Onitsha, the big challenge the Christianity had, one, Ozo Onitsha. We still have issues, but we're in dialogue. See, Tata, asking if you can night no noka. You see, Pastor Onitsha for issues or sit up and kaki, she go to night. So it's normalizing. And one of our very ardent Catholics, Ibu Diopa Lule Nabefa. And he was torn between, he was torn between that and his Christianity. He went to the Archbishop, Hiri. Hiri said, so they took a video of Ozo Onitsha. I went to Rome and presented it to the Pope. Pope said, I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't see anything wrong with that. So Ozo Onitsha goes to and it's very fundamental to our spiritual beliefs. Okay. The second book, which again we've explained to the church. You see, if you dialogue, you get understanding, and sometimes even our masquerades, cause a problem. Mana Onitsha became the foundation, and Onitsha has benefited on the back of the Christian schools, particularly the secondary schools, CKC, DMGS, QRC. Entry was very competitive. What happened? Private schools sprang up. New Bethel College, Africa College, Our Ladies High School, Washington Memorial, Etukuku Memorial, Zik Institute, New Era. So many. Onitsha now became the mecca for people who are seeking for secondary education from everywhere. So, Onitsha, military, who are military commanders, who are governors of states and everywhere, in the north and everywhere else. We can take over Nigeria. So Onitsha has benefited, okay? So we come to our culture, Onitsha culture. I'm just rushing because I don't want to hold you too long. Onitsha culture today and our traditions have four roots. Edo, which is Benin, Igala, Igbo, and then our own self-originated elements of cultural behavior, our norms and practices. Okay, Edo, our rare traditions come from Edo and Igala, mixed Edo and Igala. Okay, Ifulu, Abani, Dupetalo, Asaba. That is very much Edo symbolism, okay, which we have also. Certain other elements, which is Igala. Our spiritual beliefs, our traditional spiritual beliefs, are largely Igala and Igbo. Largely Igala and Igbo. Ndi Onitsha, more Afia, more Gonogo, Igala. We know the spiritual symbolism of Mogonogo. Na Saba, Obu, Egugu. Egugu is the equivalent for us. And the interesting thing, now Lagos, Mwelo Eyo, which they call Egugu also, and other Yoruba areas have Eyo. And Eyo in Yorubaland commands the same respect as Egugu na Saba, as Moafia and Onitsha. So there's some connection there. Then our social system is largely Igbo. by acculturation, okay? And then, of course, we have our own self-generated, internal-generated elements of our culture and tourism. Then, of course, our governance and jurisprudence is largely Edo. So, Ndi Chianyi, okay, Asian Edo, the same titles of Ndi Chianyi are repeated, or we copied it from there. Asaba has some equivalents, Iseluku has some equivalents, and so on and so forth. And the functions of Ndiche are similarly the same. And of course, as we say, culture is never constant. It keeps moving and keeps evolving. Okay. I'll talk about our political system very quickly and our judicial system. The political system, our monarch, Igwe, is at the peak of it, supported by Ndiche, who we refer to today as the political heads of their various villages, etc. Ndiche originally were the warlords to protect our boundaries. Adanuzaya Kita, Ananuzaya by word of mouth, Ejek courts and all that. But they're the political heads of their various communities. And we meet together at the Council of Ndiche, where we discuss issues of the community under the monarchy, under the monarch. I went to yesterday. We had a 4.5 hours meeting yesterday. That's normal, okay? Today we have 24 Ndiche, but the total number we could have is 52. And those are established positions, established by our ancestors, which I can't even change. I can't add or subtract. If there are vacancies, we fill them in the fullness of time. Okay? And these shade in 3 categories. Ndiume, the Madi C, and each of them looks after 1/6 of Onitsha. Ndiume, they are the first class chiefs. And then, of course, Ndiokwa are the next, and Ndiokwa Reze are the third class. All of us have our duties and so on. On the other side, I am with Ndiopa. Ndiopa are the spiritual heads of their villages and their communities, etc. So Onitsha, his village, is spiritually subject to Diopia. So I don't want to, if Onitsha, Diopa asoplo Onitsha. More no more. Diopa. I have to respect him as my Diopa. And I respect him as a Onitsha. Okay. Then other groups, constituent groups, Onitsha Improvement Union will celebrate its centenary next year. Actually, it was due this year. We'll celebrate it early next year. They're 100 years old. Doing what other town unions do. Okay. But it was founded in Lagos, actually, as a welfare organization until they came back home and so on and so forth. Our age-grade societies perform very distinct roles in Onitsha. Depending on their age, the youngest ones do the job of protecting the community. Ajano batano bodo ofa gatuli alu malife game. Ajomad batano bodo ofa gatualu malife game. As we go older, and the older ones then join Ndiche in governance of the community. The Abalanze, the also, some of them are here. Each Ozo is a spiritual anointing. It cannot be an Onitsha, it cannot be a Onitsha. So that's the significance of Ozo Onitsha. It's a stepping stone to spirituality, our traditional superiority, to rise to higher levels. They perform their own social functions in Onitsha. Ndị okenye, asị na ichi ọzọ na-egbu ọdụ n'Onitsha. Okenye elui means you can ekwu eziokwu. You will not engage in anything that is not proper, and you provide leadership. That's what it's all about. And then, Igbo Onitsha, their primary purpose Okay, after the Nakani, they were in charge of the markets. They operated the markets. But also, they look after all our shrines and deities in Onitsha. And they look after the welfare of the women, the governance of the women, the Fanaka. Unfortunately, for over 100 years, I can shiro Omu no Onitsha. Omu bu onisi ndi Igbo Onitsha. She is the leader of the women group. And Omu has almost the same authority as Eze Onitsha, except over the women. She will dress like Eze Onitsha, and in public events, she sits immediately to the left of Eze Onitsha. That is the role of the Omu. We're in dialogue, and someday we'll get it back. Then, of course, the Onitsha Youth Council, I think many of them are here, a very strong group, and their former leader, Honorable Ayamba, has done so well that the Anambra State government appointed him the Commissioner for Youths, and he's doing very, very well in that position. So that's our political setup. And the judiciary, we have stages. Okudapata between two people or between two groups. The Diopa of the community is the first level. Then Onitsha of the community is the next level. Then Obi in council sits in a court every Wednesday to adjudicate cases. And most cases are resolved at that level. Any appeal from there now comes to me as the final arbiter and the final ruler. But I can say to you that hardly, I can count number of cases and none of them has gone and come back to reverse the decision that the Obi of Onitsha, in consultation with the chiefs, has made. That is how we govern ourselves. Actually, in one of the cases that went all the way to the Supreme Court, Justice Mary Odili wrote a very strong note commending the Onitsha traditional judicial system. That if all other communities can do the same, then the workload of cases that go through the courts will reduce, and justice can be delivered faster. Onitsha, I said, the modern times started from the colonial and Christian era, okay, and kept growing. Local governments were formed, the market, administration, etc. The peak, in my own eyes, as a little boy growing up, the 1950s and 1960s were probably the high point of Onitsha as a city. In terms of the sense of industry, other professionals and so on, the expansion of the city, Fege was built, as a brand new planned environment community. I have to confess that as a primary school student, I had Fege on Saturday, Jebue block, and they give us 5 shillings after that. So we started earning money from primary school and so on. So those were the great days. There were cinemas, there were dance bands, there were bars where people go and have a good time. And people worked very hard and so on. And above that, the famous Onitsha market literature that are published, they're written and published within 1 week, Veronica, My Love, etc., etc., Onitsha market literature, which several scholars have done their PhD thesis on Onitsha market literature. The largest collection of those literature is in the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Okay? So our ancestors created those literature, have to go to Hoover Institution to find out what is there. Now, this is what Achebe said of Onitsha market literature. So one of the most intriguing questions concerning this literature, why did it happen in Onitsha? has, however, not yet been fully answered, and I suspect will never be. It's a mystery, you know. It is this area which interests me. The esoteric region from which creativity sallies forth at will to manifest itself. It says that Onitsha is the esoteric region from which creativity sallies forth to manifest itself. So all we can do is to speculate that Onitsha is such a phenomenon. This is Chino Achebe writing about the Onitsha in its glorious days when everything was bustling. The spokesman newspaper was there. Everybody wants to read. Some people read it upside down. But and politics was growing. Education, study centers, bookshops on New Market Road. Black and Maxwell. People who are doing their intermediate law studies, before they go overseas and so on. That was Onitsha for you. And Christmas time, New Year time, anyway, Carnival, from Old Market Road, Obomano, down to Ven Road North, and then back New Market Road. Fantastic. Okay? And this is what the way Onitsha had been described in those days, Onitsha of yore. He said it is remarkable for its almost mythological evocation of local history and belief. Alison Anderson, and then J.M.G. Leclésio won the Nobel Prize in 2008, and he wrote a biographical novel titled Onitsha. How did the Frenchman get to Onitsha? His father was working in CFAO Onitsha, and he came as a young man, and what he saw eventually converted into a novel. And he described Onitsha. He said the Onitsha indigene places high value on honor, decency, and amity. Leclésio. And then my friend Hank Eso, who is a newspaper columnist, said that those who knew Onitsha of yore around 1960s cannot forget its hidden allure, its mercantile exuberance, and unfeigned charm. Say, like Venice, Lagos, Las Palmas, New Orleans, or Mumbai, Onitsha had spirit and had gravitas. It had culture. Just as it had its seamy side and historical niche. These are the descriptions of Onitsha, when Onitsha was in its glory. Asaba was similar, and we had the ferry that crossed between. Crossing the ferry itself was an experience on its own. Ile-Ife, and all of that. And Onitsha and Asaba were linked. They were growing side by side. Okay. Then came the Civil War, and everything changed. Civil War changed everything. Destruction, physical destruction, but probably more damaging was the psychological destruction the Onitsha felt. Other communities, the Anambra State, the southeast, Asaba was badly damaged. We all suffered the same thing. Okay, that's the turnaround. The same Hanke Shaw came back as well as Onitsha. So after the Civil War, see, Onitsha of yore was a fun place to be. However, much has changed now. Onitsha has lost its groove. From gravitas, it's lost its groove. Verve and much of its history. Onitsha remains, as ever, the sardonic city of drudge and enterprise, that so much effort yields little in recompense, and quality of life only conveys the infinite mockery and paradox of this sometimes feral city. Still, Onitsha remains untranslatable and unreplicatable. You must visit to experience it. So the 5 years ago, so where do we go from there? How do we re-engineer and reposition and restore Onitsha? I came to the throne in 2002, photo Obodo and I defined my philosophy for governance, traditional governance of Onitsha, as peace and reconciliation based on truth and transparency as foundation for sustainable development. Okay. We have to be transparent and we have to reconcile. It's important that you must reconcile. We've been working on it for all this time. And 2017, we've had several efforts, study groups, etc., etc. 2017, we set up what we call taking Onitsha to the next level. We had 15 study groups to study all aspects of Onitsha and come up with recommendations and so on. And then after 1 year, we got recommendations. We agreed on how to start the low-lying fruits that we can harvest. Then COVID came. A setback initially, but COVID got us thinking also, what after COVID? Because COVID revealed all social engagement to Onitsha. No marriages, no funerals, no title taking, and all of that. We realized how interconnected our local economy is to one another. If there's no ceremony, Ndine have no job. Ndine canopy have no job. Ndine lemaya have no job. Ndine achafele have no job. Photographers and so on. And how do they restart after COVID? Some of them are so beaten down they couldn't restart again. So we started immediately, even during the COVID, to begin to think of post-COVID. Economic empowerment program, post-COVID. I had a couple of studies, and this is what I said. Setting up the study group, that we need to support the struggling and budding entrepreneurs in our domain in weathering the post-COVID-19 economic and social challenges. That is the target that we set. Then, when the study was over, they will set up what we call the Onitsha Advancement Foundation. And I said again, is to create and facilitate the development of programs and services that will foster a changed mindset, a participatory action, and empowerment in the lives of Ndi Onitsha Donidu and the community they serve. Okay. So we've been at it all along. We made a lot of progress and all that. On Sunday, we had our quarterly town hall meeting where Ndi Onitsha, wherever you are connected. 4 hours. We had people from 10 countries, Ndi Onitsha, connecting, where we discuss all these issues and map out the way forward. And then Onitsha Advancement Foundation is the platform for our development. We have 2 registered, it's registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission, with 2 standalone institutions on entrepreneurship development and leadership. The other one on computer, IT development. Okay? We want to make Onitsha a hub for IT development. The third one, which has not come into place, is the finance, microfinance institution to fund these young entrepreneurs. We've got a cooperative program, which has been initially very successful, but we're wobbling right now. We're looking at it. We have a health and well-being program where we manage our health, educational program, all of this, even our internal security. We have our own vigilante group, not the AVG of the government, our own internal vigilante group to service our people. So challenges. Now, most of these programs, the health and educational program, apply to any child in Onitsha, benefits from our educational program, wherever it comes from. The health program, if you walk in, we have a walk-in health center. You can just walk in as a nurse there. will attend to you and can call a doctor and all of that available. But there's a bigger Onitsha cosmopolitan city now that has grown around, that has merged even with Obosi, with Mpo, with Ogidi and all of that. Those ones present a totally different challenge. Okay? The population is growing, youth unemployment, the transient population Onitsha becomes a repository. But they sleep rough. Okay? It's terrible. Okay? The infrastructure has not grown. Infrastructure has not grown. You probably see some roads that were built in the colonial times and so on and so forth. Inadequate and non-existent infrastructure, crime within, and Kinesia Bata is there. Of course, environmental pollution, noise pollution, air pollution. Onitsha generates the largest IGR in the state, and I think that's next to nothing. All the markets, the tax collected, we don't get money reinvested. And so those people who've been on Onitsha, and the Onitsha, and the majority now on the Onitsha, who contribute to that IGR, don't get the benefit of the IGR. The roads, where they live, and so on and so forth. That is the situation that we face. But then Onitsha, being what it is in the eyes of international organizations, especially the UN Habitat. So in 2009, UN Habitat did a study, a structure plan for Onitsha and satellite towns to remap and redesign Onitsha. Residential areas, industrial areas, etc. Onitsha now is the cosmopolitan, which should include the satellite communities, Ubosi, Bo, Ogidi, Nkwale Zunaka, Nsugbe, etc. They did that and presented to our state government nothing. In 2010, at the Shanghai exhibition, Onitsha was designated one of the five fastest growing cities in the world, but with inadequate infrastructure, housing, roads, water supply, etc. And in 2012, UN Habitat came back again to do an urban profile report. First of all was the mapping up. The second time was how to implement. And then, of course, nothing has happened. And in 2016, the World Health Organization dropped the bomb and described Onitsha as the most polluted city in the whole world. Air pollution, 2016. So, Kefe Gemezi Onitsha, Agarapia ko nani yotua, okay. So we have to continue to advocate. My proposal, which I had submitted to the previous government, was to set up an Onitsha Metropolitan Development Authority, and empower it to take charge. Either you do Onitsha, Greater Onitsha, or you can even do Onitsha. Onitsha should be alone. Oka, Newi should be development authorities and so on. So it's been a long story, but I'm now at the conclusion, thankfully. If you read the main lecture, there are several issues that are there that I don't have the answer to. But I flag them, I give my own opinion when it comes to. But there are basically 4 areas that I want to I want to draw attention to in my conclusion. 1, it's important to establish the linkage between Igbo, Yoruba, Edo, and the other language groups. If you go back to that internal migration where we all took off from and then broke up, if that is true. But the truth of the matter that linguistic experts draw a connection between these people. if you don't come together, ndị ọzọ will defeat you. I don't want to say much more about that because it becomes the headline. It's very, very important that I can buy Siweputa. Any bad relationships in the past, maybe we can fix it and mend it, knowing that okay. Eluwa, his book, which is called Adonidu. That book is 700 pages long, and he made several claims about the history of Igbo, which has not received scholarly attention to authenticate it or otherwise. And he claimed there was a great empire called Adonidu that ended up, that Ile-Ife was the capital of that empire. And the Igbo were the dominant people, Igbo na-achị Ile-Ife, Adonidu, until the migration. We ought to authenticate it because it gives a new perspective to our relationships and who we are and where we came from. Third, Ezechima, from all indications, Ezechima abro Onitsha, na ụmụnna ndị nọ na Nneoma, Ezechima na all of the southeast, Ezechima na Yorubaland, okay? And again, you see, we can build up relationships and bonds and figure out how we got to where we did and all of that. And then, of course, finally, the government, I've mentioned already, to pay attention to the reengineering of the Onitsha metropolitan area is very, very important. Onitsha is the biggest city in Anambra State. You can't wish it away. And if you keep drawing IGR, you don't reinvest. It's like milking a cow without feeding the cow will die. Okay, so that's my fourth recommendation. And finally, I want to Center for Repository, Igbo Repository. We talk about digital library, etc., etc. The library. I want to announce for a start that Achebe Museum, which we're building in Onitsha, has taken a step to digitize the entire academic and scholarly collection of Professor Richard Henderson and his wife, Helen Henderson. They are both social anthropologists, and all their academic life was devoted to the study of Onitsha. So they have manuscripts, they have scholarly papers, they have newspaper cuttings, they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs of Onitsha that don't exist anymore. Video recordings, traditional music, Egwu Ayaka, and such things. They recorded everything there in his house, his library in Tucson, Arizona. I go there once a year, and we've been digitizing all of this. It's cost a lot of money, but we've preserved Onitsha. And the beauty of digitization is you can replicate. So, BC, a copy of the Henderson digital material will be presented to the Center for Igbo Repository as a start. Richard Henderson is about 93 years old, and he still operates his website on Onitsha, amightytree.org. amightytree.org. You go there, there's a treasure of information on Onitsha. And then, of course, we'll put together a collection of books on Onitsha by different authors and present to the library also. One of them is a book edited by Professor Kirun Zewu. Scholarly essays by different people. But the beauty of it for me is that it has close to 500 bibliographical references on Onitsha and Igbo. Bibliography, 500 items of bibliography. It's a treasure trove. All of that will come there. And finally, gratitude. This lecture, I take responsibility. Whatever I said, I take responsibility. But I benefited a lot from 2 people who are very close friends, or who are academics, whose scholarly comments helped to enhance the quality of the lecture. As I said, the lecture is about 61 pages long. Professor P.J. Eze of University of Nigeria, Department of Anthropology, past president of the Anthropological Association of African Anthropological Association, is a good friend. And then, of course, Professor Jerry Chukwokulu, who is Jerry, get up. Yeah. They're my friends, and they've helped me a lot. PJ was assigned to some assignment by the Federal Ministry of Education, so he couldn't be here. So that's it. By na ekene kan ekene amasi ndi Igbo malu no unu. Know thyself. If you know thyself, onye ukwu efe na abụrụ eziokwu anyazea. If you don't know ourselves, people will take it. You see, that's very, very important.